Jesus came into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, and the crowds cheered, welcomed him like a king. But the religious leaders didn't like Jesus, so they arrested him and questioned him. When Jesus said that he was the Son of God, they decided to have him killed. So they took him to the Romans. They asked that he could be executed as a trouble causer. So Jesus was whipped and beaten, and he was presented to the crowd. The Roman ruler, Pilate, each year would release a criminal at this time, the Passover time. So Pilate presented to them a murderer, Barabbas, and Jesus. And he said, "Whom should I set free?" But the religious leaders had manipulated the crowd, told them to shout for Barabbas. So they did. And Pilate said to the crowd, "Then what should be done with Jesus?" The crowd shouted, "Crucify him." So Jesus, scourged and beaten, was dragged through the streets and up the hill outside of Jerusalem, Golgotha, the place of the skull. And there they nailed him to a cross and crucified him. At noon, in the middle of the day, the sky went black. And then Jesus died. At that time, there was an earthquake, and the curtain in the temple tore into two from top to bottom. But 3 days later, Jesus rose from death. And Jesus explained that he had to let himself be killed. He had to place himself on that cruel cross. Jesus had led a perfect life and done nothing wrong, but presented himself as a sacrifice, as a substitute for our sins. He died, taking the punishment of our sins. And this meant that we could be forgiven. If we believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died for our sins, the Bible tells us we are forgiven. And God proved this by raising Jesus from death. The resurrection was the proof that what Jesus said was true. That he really was the Son of God and that he really could forgive sin. And that we are forgiven if we trust in him.